Hey, this is the chair guy. Several people asked for a more detailed explanation of intervals, so this time I'm going to use a piano and a guitar fretboard. The only difference between a fretboard and a piano is that all the notes are straight in a line on a guitar, and on a piano, the sharps and flats are separated out into these black keys. But the notes are really still straight in a row. It just looks a little different. Just as there are 12 inches in a foot, there are 12 notes in an octave, or 13 if you count the following root. So, for instance, if we start out on C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 will be the next C. It's exactly the same on a guitar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 is the next C. Intervals just refer to the distance between any of these notes. So if I'm starting out on C and I go to the very next note, this C sharp right here, the distance between C and C sharp is going to be called a half step, or a semitone on the other side of the pond. 2 notes away, this D right here would be called a whole step, or just a step, or if I'm on the other side of the pond, we would call it a tone. For the moment, I'm just going to call things steps and half steps. If we're playing in the key of C major, then this note right here, this D, would be the second note of the C major scale, or the second degree of the C major scale. So, if someone said, what is the interval between the root and its second, we would say, well, the first note, this C sharp, would be a half step, and the next note would be a whole step, the D. So the interval between the root and its second is going to be a whole step. What about the third? This E right here. Well, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. So the third is 2 whole steps away from the root. What about the fifth? That's a little more complicated. That's the G right here. Okay, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So the G is 3 whole steps and a half step away. So the interval between the root and the fifth would be 3 whole steps and a half step. That will work for any other note in the scale. It'll also work for the next root. So the difference between this C and the next C, half step, whole step, 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 half step, whole step. So the interval between the C and the next C is 6 whole steps. And of course, this will work in any other context. So for instance, if someone said, what is the interval between the second and the third? Well, the interval between the second and the third is the same as the interval between the first and the second. It's a whole step. The difference between the third and the fifth would be half step, whole step, half step. So the difference between the third and the fifth is going to be a whole step and a half step. And of course, this will work for any other note in the scale. But this is a very important concept to understand, because you could also simply say that the second is shorthand for a whole step from the root, or that the third is shorthand for 2 whole steps from the root, etc. on down the line. And this is very important later when I start talking more and more about intervallic playing, because intervallic playing just refers to relationships between notes and the root, or more simply, distances between notes and the root, or intervals.